just send a better one. She'd left Isaac to nurse his wound on the pavement. He'd only be needing an ice pack and a bandage for his ego, and she was sure his little gang of snakes would find him soon enough. Hopefully, he'd be too embarrassed to say much of the encounter. She didn't need getting out that she panicked at the touch of skin. Andrea pulled into the nearest supermarket car park and swung the car door open, ignoring the ache from where her rings dug into her knuckles and the skin around them red and creased. She curled her fist around her back and hoisted the straps over her shoulder. She desperately needed ice before the swelling became too noticeable. She also needed a pill for the excruciating pain her headache had become. She managed to shake off the feeling of Isaac's skin against hers, but the memories it stirred remained smoldering, as if every lash against her skull was a reminder of the things she'd done, the things she could never take back. With gritted teeth, Andrea slammed the door closed behind her. Surveying the crowded car park, she slid on a pair of angular sunglasses before heading towards the entrance of the store. She knew she was being watched, but there was far too many people around to spot the scouts, no doubt marking her whereabouts. Her father was finicky about such things. If she were to go one step beyond the established border that determined the east side from the west, then she'd be hauled back by her ears and possibly start a war. It was forbidden for East Siders to cross over, especially when they belonged to the ruling gang, Salva. Her father had started having people follow her around after the incident of her 17th birthday. Andrea again refrained from grimacing at the memory of bloody hands and bullet wounds, though her stomach was in knots. She was walking through the frozen aisle by the time she pulled away from her thoughts, having let muscle memory take her to the peas. She pulled the freezer door open and grabbed a packet of mixed vegetables. The numbing cold was a welcome pain as she held it against her fist. Would you like a basket? Her head snapped to the voice. The abrupt movement felt like she could have been slammed against a wall, and she winced as she pressed the icy packet against her temple. Who are you? She asked the only other person standing in the aisle. A boy, about her age, perhaps older. Then she slid the red-tinted glasses to the top of her head and realized he was wearing the store's black and green uniform. He tapped at his name tag, but the shiny surface obscured the font, and Andrea wasn't feeling overly inclined to step any closer. Would you like a basket? He repeated. She remained silent. His sun-kissed cheeks were faintly dimpled, only showing because he was smiling. No, smirking. And his eyes were a muddy-looking green. No, she finally said, turning back to the freezer and closing it. She slid her sunglasses back down the slope of her nose to refrain from squinting. She walked the opposite way down the aisle and headed towards the pharmacy section of the store. Her bruising fist was scraped and blood merged with the melting ice of the vegetable packet she still had pressed against her forehand. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deep, before scouring the shelves for painkillers. Are you sure you don't need any help? The boy asked as he came to stand beside her. Andrea dropped her hand and stared at him incredulously. Does it look like I need help? He raised his hands mockingly, but remained giving her that dimpled smile. The manager's always on my back about making sure the customer's needs are met. Well, my needs are met. You may go. She gestured absently and went back to looking for the headache tablets. The boy pulled his trouser legs up and huffed as he dropped to a crouch. Andrea shook her head and watched him rifle through the products. He picked out a bright yellow box with migraine relief printed in big bold letters on the front. Thanks, she murmured and took it from his outstretched hand. She must have looked as bad as she felt if he'd been able to guess exactly what she'd been searching for. The notion was mildly infuriating. She shifted her bag and stood a little taller, though not for any other reason than her pride. He shrugged instead, stuffing his hands in his pockets. Don't mention it. Andrea opened the box and punctured a hole in the foil with a neatly filed nail. Swallowing one of the long white tablets, she eyed the boy warily. Something about him was familiar. Maybe it was the way he stood or his easy grin, but she had a nudging feeling that they'd met before. Do we know each other? She asked, brows furrowed. He laughed. I can't believe it took you this long. Andrea narrowed her eyes and looked down to his name tag. The light was no longer reflecting off it, and she was close enough to see sat so close, he asked. He's a friend of the family. Perhaps I'll see you